Jimburdo Nimi Jan on the Monum Jimburga Diada Bakr Darngam Zando Germado or Tombatu Jan Laki Jamzor, Jeru Zerni Jangams and Jawar to Division Yella Jimmy Benzo Jala Zoran de Gontir Tobambo Jinjir Lo.
The sublime Dhamma, rarely seen in ages. Now I accept it. Understand Tathagata. In order to liberate all sentient beings, please generate supreme bodhicitta. Today I will first recite the Patu Rinpoche's the lineage of self-advices, perhaps in time. When Khenpo or Khenmo gives teachings, some of them may not have this lineage. I think I have talked about this before, but these teachings are also quite special and very practical. Perhaps after studying them, we should understand them as well. Some people have studied them before, but have forgotten since. Teachings like these are things we need to remind ourselves regularly. So this time, let's take this opportunity to study them again. Should be very helpful.
Jidmanim Baksum Yote, Quatin Janji Lama, Tikjanji Santi, Jambada, Shivjan, Janagu Baksum Yote, Plapavjan Bim Kambo, Plapartum Bichu, Plapsha Damdum, Yodugu Baksum, Lina Sim, Marna Li, Simna Lut, Jedna Gavaksum Yote, Chuvi Ja, Chabi Yer, Dumganit, Zana Gavaksum Yote, Six Ka, Sos Ka, Sigbur Lak, Namian, Sim. Xang gu baksam yote ranga yondang janji tyun shinshu ji samlo ngum nyum baksam yote glorji ngim jong yorji kungom charji gebjur jormanim baksam yote kunji xip mangbu tsok zebmu jar fiatmanim baksam yote mamu pi chu mamu bala chu maji bala lorji marchipi kacha magu baksam yote trola gardik tamla njirdo fiawala ngonko Shidmanim Baksam Yote, Ramtongan Yang, Zyanji Lapsag, Salagan Nipchu, Churmanim Baksam Yotem, Tombola Dieu, Zobola Tata, Salagan Nyangtam, Ftagmanim Baksam Yotem, Zimi Li, Chokji Shava, Ranga Yondan, Ftanugu Baksam Yote, Tan Chokdang Tan, Guyerdang Tan, Tam Chokdang Tan, Guyerdang Tan, Semchudang Tan, Nyanmanim Baksam Yote, Zyanji Totpa, Aksarji Kacha, Shimiti Kada, Yitjir Munmanim Baksam Yote, Shigbur Jum, Tombu Tob, Chorur Yan, Htamgi, Mudmanim Baksam Yote, Yerdev Sevi Mer, Janjip Sonji Nor, Ranlap Sevi She, Ftodmanim Bakso Yote, Kanjit Mambi Mer, Ranton Janji Lemba, Jangmashipe Shiba, Ftorman Nikamanim Baksum Yote, Ranga Nyemjer, Jimiti Lama, Larsalagan, Te la sokba jig yote ndor cherna ti namya rang rangla tu mabjit chudan jitin nikandrandi adam ng tsigchig yin shind zab namjirwa chimid lo chuti we shir nyangdang jawa la damba yimbe nyamsul long shi.
The content is short. It shouldn't take a week. It should be finished in 1 or 2 classes. The Khenpos and Khenmos said 4 or 5 classes. But do we really need that? Look, I can recite it all in just 1 minute. Later on, Patu Rinpoche said that this should not be casually transmitted to others. This is a very profound pith instruction. In Chinese, is there a character at the end here? It is? Really? How is it written?
Terter shipi devi yefshit lagbagam, chi labi, chi chevi wanga, wanshi jir dungur mumbar tabra sonde, di semlag non mani panab zope nat zirjing nombi tsadi yinla. Di janje la soba zirjing nombi tsatyan shibir shawu. Gondu shapa terter dungur lamando pandishib logbanur dungur lamdur nombag jirtin yende, zeri choshi jan, zeri choshi jan. Rarjit Chugjanda, Dungur Lamder Lomer Mani Bishiro. Dungur Lamkir Ungula Janjang, Ngamala, a walk Jong Shete. Dungur Lamjir Ungula Janjang, Ngamala Lorion Shete. Dungur Lamkir Ungula Janvija. 장미 ngama 보고 용르sit der dengor ji gebjirm perwa nyongtok de kerbi shifshur choa gibi chorar gibi shiro ndadag dengor chongrimni vjangna shla korim jibar tard tarji chembolagam jongorok sombe tertir tag gode rangir gitsuttan mansam bim nyongar nyakavi shiro tansim namsi lama komchuglar dengor lamdar longba chetok surande batang lu to jonz chirsona komchugdan jonbom chotne dag gebjir sarjong gushirde stingin tongshig ji len chur shajan di namyang gafchu dang tsatang dambar shago.
You only have your phone with you today, it's fine. Using your phone is okay, right? There are many pit instructions at every moment. Constantly observe yourself. This is extremely important. Both worldly and transcendental dhammas ultimately return to this. From yogi to tame his own mind. These teachings are extremely profound. Today we will continue to talk about how to transform suffering and happiness into the way. He explains how to transform both suffering and happiness into the path. Divide it into two aspects: turning suffering into the path, transforming suffering into the path in the ultimate sense. The same applies to happiness as well. Happiness becomes the path, transforming happiness into the path in the ultimate sense. From this aspect in particular, we are now talking about turning suffering into the path of enlightenment, turning suffering in the secular world into a spiritual practice. How make suffering path, as mentioned earlier, as we discussed, suffering, this is something that for everyone involved is simply not enjoyable or pleasant. Whoever you are, if you are an ordinary being, there are very few people who actually truly like suffering, at least among those around us. Among the people we see, hear about, or who are well known, there are very few enjoy suffering. People who say they long for pain are likely quite rare. Most of us hope not to experience suffering, and when suffering does come, we become especially fearful. Suffering within the cycle of samsara is unceasing, continuous. It's just like the rolling and gentle waves of the ocean. When a wave rises, another powerful wave follows right behind it. They rise and fall, one after another, continuing in a steady, unbroken rhythm that never ceases. So, in this human world, many people hope that their suffering will end forever. I'm always happy. This is a common thought among many ordinary people. But can this actually be achieved? You could say that from ancient times to the present, it has never happened. Why is that? Sometimes when we look at ancient history, whether it's Eastern history or Western history, when we look closely at their descriptions of life in some articles or books that you may come across, at those times we can feel that in fact, people 300, 500, or even 1,000 years ago also hoped to escape suffering and find happiness. But those who truly achieve this, perhaps aside from a very few bodhisattvas, or those with exceptional spiritual practice, are rare. So this kind of pith instruction we are discussing may be something that many of you here have never heard of or seen before. You never encountered this before. For you, a new spiritual practice. Some have studied Buddhism for years. When it comes to Vajrayana teachings, we see true nature of suffering and happiness. They immediately dissolve or transform into the non-dual wisdom of emptiness and bliss. This kind of situation happens quite often. We often see such principles. However, in the exoteric schools, in worldly life, all suffering ultimately becomes a favorable condition for practice. It is a favorable condition for practice. But also, there is no need to suppress this kind of suffering when suffering arises. I should gladly accept it and be happy. Wow, suffering has come, how wonderful. Today I suffer. Wow, I am truly incredibly grateful and blessed. Many people, for some of us practitioners, so did you sleep well last night? If you didn't sleep, what happened? Later, I will ask you whether you slept well last night, slept badly. That's just wonderful. You're truly amazing how you've been feeling. I'm not in a good mood. Wow. From now on, we should talk about things in a different way. How is your health lately? My health hasn't been good recently. Oh, then that's not interesting. If you say your health is good, that's not interesting. You have few chances to practice. If you say, my health isn't good, that's wonderful. With the blessing of the three jewels, your health will never truly be healed. Hearing this, it can be hard to accept. But for someone who truly practices well, they would actually think this way. Their way of thinking has some rules that differ from our worldly ways, from traditional rules or our customs. It has a bit of an opposite flavor. But this is actually very, very meaningful. Maybe this is actually really very good because we want to follow the traditional, the way most people think. If we hope for happiness, the more we chase happiness, the farther it gets. It's just like a child in many ways, chasing a rainbow when suffering unexpectedly comes upon us. The more we fear it, the less it lets us go. If we face suffering without any fear, come if you will, show me what you've got. Come on. Such words seem painful and are very shy. It doesn't dare come close. At that point, ghosts, spirits, and evil forces, these two will not so easily or quickly take advantage of you. In these respects, we should try to accept things in a different way. Perhaps in your own life, it really helps, even if it doesn't help. If we understand these principles, rest assured, there will really be no harm at all. I think that in our process of spiritual practice, we still need to try out various different methods of practice, exploring what works best. If one method doesn't suit your disposition, another method might be especially suitable for you. So what should we do with it afterwards? We should see it as ours, like a deity. There is a key instruction method in the teachings. Once I met a former overseas student, someone who had spent time studying in the West and learning about different cultures and perspectives. They started reading the application of suffering and happiness. In the end, what did they say? Some of us felt this teaching was good, especially after understanding it through some Western texts. It feels right for helping us. So what should we do next? We should treat it. Always carry this text with us. I think all of us here receiving this transmission, essential teachings, if we treat it as our daily recitation from now on, check it out in 2 days. Constantly reviewing all of its contents carefully, not only mastering the words and phrases well, but more importantly, if we can truly integrate its meaning, your life, perhaps daily living, will be greatly benefited. Some pains that others simply cannot face for you will become just a very minor matter in the future as time goes on, eventually. I think as practitioners, what we should gain are some key instructions that ordinary people cannot obtain. This is what is called a pith instruction. If ordinary people can all obtain it, and we can too, not pith, if anyone can do it, but we can't do it, then we ought to feel deeply ashamed. We have studied for so long teachings we received compared to many in the world, key instructions and essential points. Yet, when difficult afflictions arise for us in our lives, we have no real ability or courage to face them at all, then whether we have studied or not in a certain sense, it plants a virtuous seed. Other than that, in terms of its actual effect, it doesn't really just bring out the power of the Dharma. I think this is something that everyone really should be clear about. Yesterday, we talked earlier about the method of transforming suffering into the path. We need to find a practice that a teaching speaking to us must be practiced. Moreover, it's best to become quite proficient in this practice. Don't fail to understand the teaching's words, nor its content. If so, when you apply it, you won't be able to use it. If you are familiar with this practice, just like some people have a strong connection with bodhicitta, and they often cultivate bodhicitta in their daily lives. When facing, they can develop bodhicitta mentally. Some people have a very good sense of renunciation as well. If you are familiar with renunciation practices, it will also be especially easy to apply them when needed. Practices that you are particularly familiar with yourself, if you combine them in your practice, it's extremely effective. Now, let's talk about how simply turning suffering into an aid for virtuous action is still simply not enough. When suffering arises or when a loved one passes away at such times, if you make suffering aid for virtuous action, it won't be an obstacle or become something causes you to lose faith because of it, or makes you completely discouraged. It's not like that. It becomes favorable for your practice. It doesn't block your spiritual path and becomes a supportive condition. Is that enough? Not sufficient. What's needed? You also need to clearly recognize that once you've made it part of your path, you must ensure that the strong sense of joy it brings is maintained and stable. This is still quite difficult to achieve because with such suffering, for example, when you are ill, even if it becomes a favorable condition for practice, it is still not enough. So what is really needed then? First, see suffering as part of your path. You become very familiar with it, fully understand it. After understanding what does it really lead to, it gives rise to a very strong sense of joy. And this joy is not something that happens only occasionally. For example, today I am quite seriously ill, but this illness has not become an obstacle to my practice. It isn't a hindrance to my practice. It has actually made me even more joyful. Today I am sick, but I am happy. This joy is not at all faint or weak. It should be very intense. Yeah, I'm so happy. It's just like when we get a holiday or unexpectedly come across delicious food or receive money. At those times, there is a kind of, how should I put it, an indescribable feeling. Our expressions show we're happy. That kind of joy when encountering suffering, such joy, such happiness. And this joy, it is continuous, stable, key. Of course, I think for many of us, well, especially for those who have never practiced before, this is a bit difficult. Not when discussed should be like this, no problem. But when real suffering actually does befall you, in reality, not only do you not feel any joy, you don't even have the ability or courage to apply the teachings. You sigh, why am I like this? Immediately, your whole expression, your words, many things just collapse. This is how ordinary people are. If someone is very familiar with Mahayana practices, especially those who are well versed in them, when they encounter suffering, they feel especially joyful. In the past, there was Asanga Bodhisattva in our Tibet. In his biography, for a period of time, his virtuous thoughts and meditative states in dreams disappeared. Later, after he became ill because of this disease, his original state was restored. Once he became even more joyful and truly even more diligent. So, just as we mentioned earlier, for a wise person, every experience they encounter in life become supportive for their practice, supports practice, but it also makes him feel even happier than before, because for some Mahayana Buddhists, they rarely face adverse conditions. Once they face, the chance to practice has arrived. Back during, there were eminent masters of Tibetan Buddhism. When they were imprisoned at that time, they would always remind each other, this is our chance to practice transforming suffering into the path. You must practice well. There were monks and masters from Qinghai, when they were being publicly criticized at that time, they would say, today, the way others are criticizing me is even more excellent than the Vajrayana practice of distinguishing samsara and nirvana. Distinguishing between existence and peace, to increase my practice, a special tantric act. When you criticize, when others deliberately come to judge and slander you, when I was young, I often witnessed these kinds of things. It happened quite a bit. When they were being criticized, most of the truths may not be applicable, but they deliberately pinned it on you, and their behavior was also really extremely terrible. But some practitioners regarded this as a genuine practice, even better than distinguishing between existence and peace in this context. If we truly want to be happy in our lives, many people aren't ready for and probably don't have it. But if you have cultivated yourself in this area, your sense of joy might be very strong and intense, and it will also be continuous and stable at any time. What should we be thinking about in our hearts? All these principles we've just discussed earlier, turning suffering, but require more joy at any time, especially when we encounter difficulties, when we are unhappy or things are unpleasant at such times. We need to realize that the most precious opportunity for our practice has arrived. We should truly, immediately cherish this opportunity. In this way, this suffering, for me, has already become, time and again, a rare and vast support for fortunate rebirth and deliberation. I think this way, then such suffering, which may be hard for many ordinary people to accept, for me it has honestly happened many times, because more suffering comes my way. The more opportunities I have, these are rare rebirths for humans and gods, and liberation from hearers to solitary realizers to bodhisattvas to Buddhahood, the happiness and joy of liberation, the greatest and best support, a great companion. Therefore, I still want to practice in this way. On the surface, it may seem that these sufferings appear to be cruel and harsh, unpleasant, unacceptable, but in reality, they are the source of the greatest joy. Indeed, on the surface, our suffering does appear very harsh. If you fall ill, no one would want that. If your loved ones leave you, on the surface, this kind of situation is also especially hard to accept. It appears this way. But what is it really like in actuality? In reality, in fact, it is still very meaningful and significant. Therefore, we should truly appreciate suffering. We should truly and deeply fall in love with suffering. Who should you love? I should truly love suffering. We really should have this kind of spirit. So, in fact, we should rejoice in this way. Here, he mentions something, just as people often say, just like Tibetan cardamom and pepper, mixed with sugar cane and made into a pill. There is such a saying, as people often say, what does it mean? People often, as you may have heard, have this kind of saying. It's something you might notice from time to time. There is something called Tibetan cardamom. It is actually a type of medicinal plant. It should be cardamom from Tibetan, anything called Tibetan cardamom. The flavor of this dish is rather spicy, with a noticeable heat that spreads across the palate. Its overall taste is honestly not particularly pleasant. And then there's pepper. Pepper is quite similar to Sichuan peppercorn, right? Many of us, as you might expect, really like it.
and often add some pepper powder to our food. But in places, people don't like it. Some prefer Sichuan peppercorn or other spices. But pepper also has a bit of spiciness to its flavor. If you consume it directly, it's not particularly easy to accept, whether it's cardamom or pepper or any other spice you might find in your kitchen pantry. If you take it directly, especially for those who have never been used to it before, in their daily lives, honestly, it's still a bit challenging to take. It's both bitter and spicy, and honestly, it's just not easy to handle. But what if you combine it with something else? For example, with sugarcane sweet, juicy sugarcane, which is enjoyed for, if you carefully mix sweet sugarcane together and make it into small, delicious, round little balls, or make it into sort of cookies, then everyone can enjoy it for themselves because its flavor becomes sweet, sour, and spicy all at once. So what effect does it have exactly? Actually, it can help expel dampness from our bodies, as well as help to detoxify us in our bodies, supporting our overall health. And for digestive or stomach issues, actually, whether you are talking about pepper or cardamom, both of these spices these kinds of medicines are often used. So eating them directly is still rather unpleasant. Sometimes in Chinese medicine nowadays, we add sugar or a bit of salt to make it taste better. I sometimes think coffee is the same way. If you drink coffee straight, it's very bitter. American or English coffee, that's quite bitter. If you happen to add just a little bit of sugar and a splash of milk to it, well, and gently stir it up, wow. That aroma is just incredible. It smells so delicious and so good. Actually, this is just a kind of habit. For people who aren't used to drinking coffee, they wonder why anyone would like it. The taste is also especially strange. It's not exactly spicy, nor is it particularly salty, and it doesn't really taste sweet either. But once you get used to it, you get addicted. This is a very strange taste. A lot of people actually end up really liking it, honestly. It's the same principle. So what exactly is he using this as a metaphor for here? In our world, the ups and downs of life, the sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy flavors of existence, sometimes the various problems that arise in our lives truly involve both joy and sorrow, moments of parting and heartfelt reunion. There are many unique flavors in life, each with its own story, that are really quite hard to accept. There's sourness, spiciness, bitterness, sweetness, and saltiness. In life, there are all sorts of tastes and experiences. If you combine these with the sweetness in spiritual practice, which is like sugar fragrant and sweet, with a gentle aroma that fills the air. So when you carefully mix all of these wonderful flavors together, at first it feels a bit unfamiliar. Gradually, little by little, what this means is the bitter flavors that occur in life, the sour, sweet, bitter, and the sweet, delicate sugar of spiritual practice, when combined together, create a unique flavor that, as you can see, is actually easy to accept. And when you accept, it is beneficial overall for your body and mind. This analogy is indeed very meaningful in many ways. The Precious Garland of the Middle Way also mentions, if a king delights in generosity, His Majesty joys, like cardamom and pepper wrapped together with a ball of sugar. The Precious Garland also describes this. King Lexing was told that if you truly delight in giving, if you genuinely and wholeheartedly enjoy and sincerely take pleasure in generosity, and your actions often benefit sentient beings, then such majesty will bring great joy to all beings. This kind of joy is like cardamom and pepper wrapped together with sugar into a ball. What does this mean? If you take a delicious, tempting piece of colorful candy that is carefully and lovingly wrapped in a sweet, sugary coating, or pepper that is packaged in this way, such as this, even though it may sometimes taste a bit bitter or spicy, people can still, for the most part, accept it. If you are truly a ruler and you are very helpful to others, there are also some impressive ones, and have some truly noble actions, even if you sometimes appear harsh in certain situations and seem that way, everyone will still, without question, truly consider you an exceptionally outstanding ruler. Some of our leaders and people in charge are like this as well. Although sometimes their words or criticisms or even their honest feedback are genuinely hard to accept, they are also generous and willing to give at times. They genuinely want to help others. So overall, people are generally quite happy with them for the most part, it seems. This kind of analogy also appears in the treatises of Nagarjuna Bodhisattva. Here, it is also specifically mentioned that what is our life really like when we stop to think about it? We must taste flavors, sour, spicy, and bitter. But if you can turn these things, just as we mentioned earlier, into traditional Chinese pill and then take it in, because as you'll find, it's actually very beneficial and helpful for you in many ways. Good medicine tastes bitter, but cures the illness. Honest advice sounds harsh, but benefits conduct. There is a saying like this in the world as well. It may seem rather harsh, or the way it is presented may seem quite cruel, but in reality, it is in fact actually quite beneficial to you. If it's useful, then for the sake of long-term benefit, we have no choice but to accept it. Because sometimes when we undergo surgery or acupuncture, these temporary actions are quite hard for you to accept. But in reality, as long as it benefits your long-term health in the grand scheme of things, you will still honestly accept such actions, right? In the same way, for the time being, for the present time, it may seem that this bitterness in terms of your life is still very hard to accept and feels rather cruel. But if we combine the wonderful medicine of spiritual practice and take it together in the long run, suffering not only won't harm you, it can even actually be beneficial to you. Some of our Dharma friends may not have at this very moment in time. Honestly, I don't really know if I've truly accepted it before, at least not to myself. For you, this is also a new attempt and opportunity to try something you haven't done before. It's a moment, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's drinking coffee, chocolate is also good. When you're not used to the ingredients inside, it feels really quite strange. I used to know a Tibetan relative of ours. We went to Chengdu to eat, and I ordered some bitter melon. He never tried it before and tasted a little. This tastes terrible. What is this stuff? He was really just like that. I mean, just exactly like that. But a few years later, as time went by, he became fond of eating bitter melon. I asked, how were you before? Now you actually like this. He said, it seems like now I find it really delicious. So the suffering that we sometimes experience in our lives is like this too. At first, when you have to accept it, it's especially hard to bear. But as you gradually practice and get used to it, you might not even like sweet things anymore. Instead, you come to prefer the bitter ones. Because sweet things sometimes, for conditions like the three highs in various aspects, they might not actually be beneficial, especially for things like diabetes, right? Too much sweetness isn't really good. So like when we enjoy eating bitter melon, we should also be willing to accept the bitterness in life. Such spiritual practice. It is possible that as a result of these changes, our lives could actually become more meaningful and fulfilling, giving us a deeper sense of purpose and significance in everything we do each day. We should delve deeply and thoroughly, repeatedly reflecting on the reasoning behind this and train our minds to find joy. This principle that we have just discussed, in particular, truly, the deep and profound pain and suffering we all experience in life, if it's like drinking coffee or taking Chinese medicine, if we simply think about it in this way, it's easier for us to accept it. Sometimes, actually, for people, a lot comes down to psychological factors. If one's motivation is truly strong, even things we usually find somewhat bitter, you can still be willing to accept them. Just like the hardships we endure in pursuit of the Dharma, if you have strong faith in the Dharma, the physical and mental pains, however small, you can completely accept them. Even the kinds of suffering that ordinary people cannot endure, you are just able to accept as well. I once read the biography of Master Nenghai from Han Buddhism. I don't really know if you have read it or not. I think some aspects of his spirit in seeking the Dharma, it's very good to see Master Nenghai and Master Fazun initially wanted to go to Japan to study. Later, some monks who came from Japan said,
that Buddhism over there was just not as good as in Tibetan. Especially since there were many discoveries at Yonghei Temple, such as Tibetan Tripitaka and key treatises. So later, Master Nengai made a solemn vow to go to Tibetan. Back then, it wasn't like it is now. Transportation was not very convenient either. On top of that, every era has its own ethnic conflicts, as well as some political factors. At that time, when they arrived in Kengding, they still encountered many, many difficulties throughout their journey. I read about it before, but I haven't looked at it directly recently. But it's like that. When you have time, you should perhaps read that biography. He arrived at Pauma Mountain in Kangding, the one who is also often referred to as Pauma Liuliu. From there, he began his journey to Tibetan to study. It seems that he also went to Litang along the way. At that time in Litang, he met a respected elder monk who was 80 years old. This monk made a pilgrimage from Hasa to spiritually advance. But he said, from my age and more, well, I think that perhaps, it would be best for you to go to Hasa. He even wrote a letter by hand. Later, when he set out from Kangding to Lhasa, the journey was still extremely arduous. It's not like our Dharma friends nowadays. Today I can't get any water. It's so painful. There's no light at all today. How very sad. I can't purchase any vegetables today. Right now, it's so hard. It's not like, if you look at it, there really is a noticeable difference, especially when you compare them side by side. Initially, there were several of them together. They carried on their backs some luggage for their belongings, tents to sleep in at. They walked all the way like this. By the time they finally reached Chamdo, after a long and arduous journey at last, a full 2 months had passed. They walked the whole way on foot from Kangding to... On the road, they encountered wild beasts and bandits. At that time, Han Chinese people simply weren't even granted permission to enter. All sorts of things, happened. He always thought to get the Dharma, even the soles of his shoes were completely worn out. As he stepped barefoot onto the cold, slippery ice, a sharp pain shot through him when thorns pierced the sensitive skin of his feet. I was freezing all day. Only at night, when he was a bit warmer, could he feel the thorns stuck in his feet. Little by little, they finally reached Chamdo. Took 2 months. Originally, between Kamdo and Hasa, it's exactly at the midpoint between Hasa and Kangding. But after eventually reaching the Chamdo region, because his walking endurance had gradually become much stronger and more resilient over time, his legs were stronger. So it only took him a month to reach Lhasa. So from Kangding to Lhasa, it took him more than 3 whole months in total to walk the entire way, step by step. At that time, it should have been 1928. It was probably during the 1920s. At that time, when he was studying there, he also experienced some discrimination. He couldn't get food, nor could he receive any teaching. It seems that many people don't teach the Dharma and often simply can't get the secrets. It seemed that he didn't receive much Dharma at all. So he went to India and then returned. The second time he went, he did receive some teachings, including the Absamya Alankara, primarily focusing on logic. He received essential instructions and key points. Why am I talking about this particular topic today? You might be wondering, actually, if a person truly falls in love with the most profound Dharma teachings, with the deepest spiritual values, then any physical suffering experienced in the process, any mental suffering felt, are all things that he can completely transcend. If you truly love Mahayana Buddhism and Vajrayana practice, then the hardships you go through to obtain them as time goes on should be acceptable. Like in the mundane world, when someone falls in love with someone, they may endure a great deal of suffering for that person, but to them, it is still worthwhile. So for us humans, well, sometimes there are many different and unique ways to accept suffering. This is also exactly what is being explained here in this context. If we examine thoroughly and contemplate the principles within, then as we habituate our minds to happiness and rely on practice, as the intention toward happiness increases, or as happiness occupies the majority of your mind, resulting in both physical and mental suffering, seem to become much less apparent. If your practice is good, and you continuously apply methods to transform such suffering into the path as your motivation keeps increasing, then at a certain point in your practice and in your daily life, it will seem much of the suffering to you is not so intense anymore. Just before we had studied the Dharma, we were people who suffered greatly. But after learning the Dharma, especially if you study it more deeply, then you find that quite unexpectedly, many different things. I used to be confused. I used to be especially foolish. I used to be especially naive. The afflictions and suffering I had then, now looking back, are things that are very easy for me to have. Some people who are wealthy, wise, or capable, if they haven't truly learned these key points, are tormented, although on the surface, it seems like they are surrounded by a halo, very radiant and almost ethereal. But in reality, their hearts are especially fragile. They feel insecure. And they have these personal issues.
As their Dharma practice continues to improve,
As time goes on, their mind gradually becomes filled with a deep and lasting sense of happiness and contentment, growing more situations where they are unhappy almost gradually disappear. In this way, nothing can harm their mind. At a certain point, they become extremely strong. The Subhastaratmanidhi also says, at the beginning of our studies, it is important that we approach learning with a genuine sense of fear, but when we face terrifying, we can truly face all of these challenges fearlessly. The Bodhikaryavatra also states that even when a child of the Buddha faces difficulties, virtue increases and no negative karma is created. In the end, through their practice, their virtuous qualities continue to grow, and as a result, negative karma will not arise in your life. So you will avoid the negative. Therefore, suffering becomes less and less apparent for those who are carefully observing in their surroundings and does not cause any so-called harm to the mind. Nowadays, many of us say, I feel a profound sense of pain because someone has hurt me deeply, leaving a lasting emotional wound. We feel disappointed and hopeless. But if we can make suffering and happiness the path, the damage that was done to it, the blow that it suffered, left as significant and lasting, should not exist at all in any way. The mind indeed will not be harmed. So then, what precisely is this? This is the sign of patience overcoming illness. Patience is somewhat different from the patience described in the usual Bodhikaryavatara. In the Bodhikaryavatara, it's about enduring and holding on. But the patience here, I am willing to accept the pain. Not only do I accept it, I even want to be joyful about it. This kind of patience can overcome all mental and physical illnesses. Shows signs. In the end, however, others try to create obstacles for you, it won't work because you are willing to accept suffering. When others try to create obstacles for you, wanting you to suffer, but you are, of course, willing, if you are willing, no matter how others try to create obstacles, it won't work. If I have a resentful enemy and this resentful enemy starts to harm you, you feel that being harmed like this actually makes you happy. In that case, how could others possibly harm you? It's impossible. Even spirits and deities are the same way. If worldly spirits, demons, or heretics try to harm you, if I hurt you, you will be in pain. But if you truly accept and allow the suffering, then there's really nothing at all that they can possibly do to you. You know, it's like what we often say, fighting poison with poison, using one harmful thing to counteract another. If someone truly tries to harm you, you would be happy about it, wish for it. Today, my opportunity has come. If you think like this, then in this world, it would be very hard for anyone to deal with you, right? This kind of key instruction, all spirits and gods use this method to subdue obstacles. This is one approach. We'll discuss this in following sections. Generally, in the methods of cutting through obstacles, all of these also use this approach directly, head-on, to confront adverse conditions, evil spirits, or illness demons. This needs mental strength, meditative experience. Otherwise, whatever you say, in reality, whether you can actually battle or face these obstacles or not, it's still hard to say at this point in time. Next, as we have previously mentioned, we need to eliminate the aversion to suffering. This is, as we understand it, the foundational basis for transforming suffering into the path. We must remove the unwillingness to accept suffering. Most of us, ordinary people, as human beings, really do not want to suffer, especially in our lives. Everyone wants happiness, but we need to get rid of this aversion to suffering. This is key to transforming suffering. When we started talking yesterday, 2 points mentioned. One is to end unwillingness, and the other is to feel joy when suffering arises. The first is the basis for transforming suffering into the path. If you don't have this at the moment, if you are afraid of suffering, make suffering into path, might not be repairable. Because when you're fragile, yield, and are timid, and your mind is impossible to transform suffering into path, if we are especially afraid of suffering and our minds are particularly agitated and anxious, in this case, in fact, can be transform suffering into the path. That's definitely impossible. Transform suffering as path. First, accept it. This is the most basic requirement. Then, on this basis, you need to give rise to a sense of joy. The analogy of transforming suffering into the path, turning suffering into the path, can help boost mind. Perhaps this way is also better. Directly practicing the method of transforming suffering into the path can also help to further enhance the previous state of mind. In fact, why is that? Because by relying on suffering, we can truly experience and grow virtuous actions. If we never encounter suffering, we might never be able to practice at all. Through this experience of suffering, some people truly come to understand that samsara is meaningless and know how to cultivate renunciation in your daily life each day. Because for many people, it is really the case that if they didn't experience suffering, you might never wake up. Sometimes I think about our current movies and TV shows, and I am grateful for them. Why is that? Because they still have a sense of guidance. When people encounter suffering, they are encouraged to go to temples or become monastics. Suffering is what sentient beings experience. When you encounter it, because you don't really have anything else, even though at that time you don't have renunciation or bodhicitta, or in the TV shows I watched before,
It seems that when encountering suffering,
they really need to go to a monastery and seek out an old monk. At that moment, you recall previous causes. I've figured it out. Because movies in every era also serve as a kind of guidance for people in life, the best educational medium. So you immediately remember, now I have nowhere else to turn. What should I do? Maybe I should become a monk. At first, you don't have any sense of renunciation at all. You came here to escape suffering, but you realize the nature of suffering is like this. Eventually, whether you ultimately become a truly great Dharma master or not, in the end, a great practitioner, or even someone who attains the rainbow body, you realize through practice. So sometimes it seems that maybe some directors or maybe even some scripts didn't have this intention, but instead they end up guiding suffering beings onto the virtuous path. And in some cases, it really does, in reality, end up turning out this way. If it weren't like this, perhaps, just maybe, there would truly be no way. Because when you experience this suffering, your virtuous actions also continue to steadily keep increasing. So the suffering that you inevitably encounter in your life, the more painful it is, the more it's actually worth rejoicing over. Each and every one of us should absolutely remember this. The more painful it is, the more it's worth rejoicing over. In the future, as we move forward, our overall approach and methodology will be different. In the past, we thought the happier we were, the more joyful we felt, because without suffering, I was very happy. But in some of the practices within Tibetan Buddhism, the more pain you feel, the more I suffer. I don't want to live anymore, what should I do? And all the people who are around you say, that's simply wonderful. They're very joyful. The more they rejoice in your merit, the more it's worth celebrating. Because this kind of practice is also, in fact, possible. It truly helps our spiritual practice. According to what's been said, starting from these small sufferings, we practice step by step, and gradually it becomes easier to make progress. At the very beginning, it should be relatively minor suffering transformed into part of the path, and gradually you make progress. So what does this indicate? It means that over time you become adept at transforming even great suffering into the path. Therefore, this is how one should practice in daily life. Because these experiences and states that are not in harmony with your own mental continuum, quite difficult to obtain if you're not in harmony. And at the very beginning, you encounter extremely intense suffering, and you try to directly transform it into the path for your mental continuum. You might not be at that level, yet it's a bit difficult. So at the beginning, if you have a headache, or someone says something mean to you, or you're just not feeling well today, when you experience this kind of suffering, you should think, I suppose I should accept this kind of suffering. Truly, I must. I I'm happy that I encountered a little trouble today. I should cultivate a joyful mind practice like this gradually. If you practice gradually, then with any habit in the world, over time, you will definitely begin to notice a difference. There isn't a single one out there that can't be cultivated. Indeed, practice long, it gets easy. Nothing's impossible. Isn't it said in the Bodhikariyavatara, endure small harms, you endure hardship as long as you practice. Truly, there isn't a single thing you can't accomplish, not one. There are some minor hazards present at the very beginning of the process. If you learn to truly endure, even just a little bit, when you face truly significant and great difficulties, you'll definitely be able to endure those as well. Our mental strength really can be trained through habituation. This kind of training is indeed very important, truly essential and significant. Enduring hardships in seeking the Dharma, if you learn step by step, no matter how significant the difficulty is, I know you can handle. Take, for example, a soldier. If he has trained for a long time to endure the hardships of the battlefield, in the end, after all is said and done, he will also ultimately be able to bear it, to endure it patiently. So, how should we think about this in this situation? At the very beginning, this kind of practice may indeed be somewhat difficult because, after all, what are our habitual ways from before? Typically speaking, to avoid pain and seek pleasure. But now we need to break through this common mindset. At such times, we are able to accept it. And this kind of acceptance is more meaningful and more valuable. Biographies and practices of great masters and eminent monks still move us deeply, truly. I once read the biography of the great Tibetan translator Chaglotsawa Choje Pal, translators. The biography of translator Chia. It should be available in English and in Chinese. But Khenpo Rinpoche's Chinese biography seems hard to understand. The translation isn't especially clear. For the Tibetan version, some great masters collected biographies of all Tibetan Lotsuas and Panditas and have compiled them. Such collections exist. I saw a translator named Chia among them. It seems that in Chinese, his name is rendered as Dharma Sivamin. The way this translator sought the Dharma is also, in fact, quite interesting. Actually, in fact, he was a monk from Tibet. He went to Nepal and India. He really ought to have lived, by all accounts, in the 13th century. As I recall, one of his experiences was like this. This is a broad account. He went to Nalanda Monastery. He also went to Vajrasana in India. He visited them, and each visit was extensive. But what left the deepest impression on me was this. One time, when he was in Nepal, he heard that in India, the wars caused by the Turkic tribes were extremely severe, and the destruction of Buddhism was also very intense. At that time, he wanted to go, but didn't dare to. Someone advised him very strongly not to go, but two Panditas told him that if he went, there shouldn't be any danger to your life. You can return and obtain the Dharma. Later, he eventually traveled with some merchants, wealthy people. They would take the bodies of their relatives to the Ganges River, just like in Tibet nowadays, where some bodies are taken for sky burial, which is considered very meaningful. It was really the same back then. He went to India with them, together on a journey. The damage the Turks inflicted on Buddhism was extremely severe, especially when it came to Nalanda Monastery. Nalanda Monastery had suffered destruction before. When he went there later, there were about 70 monks left. Among them was an elderly monk, over 90 years old. When he arrived there, they all said, tomorrow the Turkic Asuras are definitely coming. The day after tomorrow, something's coming, everyone was. Everyone was incredibly panicked. At night, they said the invaders would come the next day. That old monk quietly told them he was a great Pandita, and there were 4 other Panditas as well. But that old monk, I think his name was Rahula, he insisted, all of you must leave. Let me just stay here alone for a little while. Charzawa felt a bit reluctant. How can you stay here alone? Old monk, everyone go, go, go. No one should stay behind. So all left. He said, I'll stay here. At first, the old monk also said to him, why are you so stupid? It seems that you really are, without a doubt, truly, unmistakably a Tibetan. You really are. Charuzawa said, if die, won't leave. I will still stay by your side. After everyone else had left, the old monk said, it seems you are actually a rather steadfast person. What should we do when the Turks come tomorrow? He said, we will still have a way to escape. You carry me on your back. There is a Mahakala shrine nearby. The Mahakala in this shrine hall was actually discovered by Nagarjuna Bodhisattva in the past. At first, the Turks planned to destroy it, but in the end, all those people died. None dares near it. All right, let's go ahead and step into that shrine. So he carried the old monk there on his back. The next day, 300 soldiers arrived, but it was almost as if none of them even saw them. Later, many of the ruins of Nalanda monastery that remained, everything was either burned or destroyed, and then they left. Later, he slowly carried the old monk back again. In the end, it seemed like they were all gone. He requested some teachings in front of him, sought teachings. Charuzawa stayed there for about 2 years. Whenever he went to Vajraseat, there was always a woman who told him, don't go there, the Turks are there. You can't really go there. But in his biography, it often appears the woman was actually Tara. Tara's entire pilgrimage to him played a big role. Later, when he was about to leave the old monk missed him. He said, perhaps I am already old, maybe, and the two of us will surely not meet again in this lifetime. But you are a person of great faith. I have transmitted a lot of Dharma to you. In the future, you should teach this Dharma to as many beings in Tibet as you can. He had others carefully carry him on a litter, a kind of portable bed, to the banks of the Ganges. The old monk personally came to see him off. Chaklotsawa had to leave. He left with great sadness. Later, when he reached Tibet, he told many stories about his guru. He transmitted this Dharma to many people in Tibet. This is quite widespread. What this really means is that some of us, including those who heard Chaklotsawa's story, truly, in order to seek the Dharma back then, were willing to risk their life. Otherwise, during times of war, he's going there. If it had been for tourism or sightseeing or for any other belief, he definitely wouldn't have dared. Moreover, it was extremely dangerous. But in order to obtain the true Dharma, some of the suffering in this world became a kind of happiness for him, spiritual motivation source. This has been the case from ancient times up to now. Many people have experienced this. So if we go to India to seek the Dharma, or to Tibet, or to other places to pursue it, obtaining the true Dharma is very important. During the process of seeking it, or while you are in pursuit of it, there may at times be some suffering. From our perspective, it seems we don't really face the same hardships as the great masters of the past. They endured hunger, lacked, and even faced the horrors of war, poisonous snakes, and the dangers of wild animals. These hardships aren't as bad for us. So the minor sufferings we experience should be endured for the sake of obtaining the true Dharma. They are also worth accepting while seeking the Dharma. We face setbacks. I encountered some sad things. We should still feel joyful about them, relying on pain. I should have been, may all my sins be removed. I have wandered in samsara since beginningless time without any meaning. Perhaps I have lost many heads and brains in the past, but in order to obtain the Mahayana Dharma, during this process, if others slandering me, or my own poor health, or feeling unhappy and so on, these are also ways of purifying negative karma. Some of us say it's okay. Though it's painful, it's just purifying karma, it's okay. I'll endure it. For now, I can still persevere. But please, precious Guru, bless me even more, so that I won't have to suffer at all. Hearing this, you think this person practices diligently. But in the end, it's still deep down about not wanting to suffer So to make suffering part of the path in your sessions, you should pray to the Guru and the three jewels. At the beginning, pray that suffering may be transformed into the path. Pray suffering is not an obstacle. If you get sick and decide not to study again, when you face difficulties, I immediately give up. For now, this suffering can't become the path. Pray to Guru, three jewels, asking that your suffering be transformed into the path and not become an obstacle to your practice. If your strength in practice increases even a little, if your determination grows, turn suffering to path, but you can also fully accept suffering if that's the case. Then you can make offerings to the three jewels and to spirits, such as visiting a charnel ground or making offerings to Dharma protectors and the three jewels. When offering to the three jewels, aspire. Pray to grow virtue, may adverse conditions descend upon me. Hard to bear. When we recite prayers to Dharma protectors bless. So today I experience suffering and obstacle. We sometimes even wish, in some cases, for the coronavirus to come upon us. Nowadays, many of us recite prayers to Dharma protectors and Tara, don't come here right now. And we wear all kinds of protective amulets around our necks. We pray blessings of Dharma protectors. Don't let pain come upon me. But when your practice improves a bit, you pray to the Dharma protectors, let me endure suffering. May the illnesses and pains of sentient beings come to me. Let me be able to bear all the current adversities. Actually, this is real. There were some hippies in America. What are hippies? They are people who go against tradition and resist customs. Many young people found this meaningful. For a time, it became a very cool and widely recognized pop culture trend. It was considered great. Youth enjoyed it. Like that now. I see that many people today really are like this. Sometimes we just can't accept it. The other day, I was staying in Chengdu and there was a food street below. On that street, starting in the afternoon, there were long lines literally everywhere. Basically, all the people lining up were young people. They were in their 20s. There were few 30-some. It was all college students, all young people lining up. Among the foods, there were many flavors. Some had an especially sour taste. Some even tasted like unclean manure. Some tasted just like vomit, really unique. I even went there on purpose once. They had vegetarian meat and potato options. Wow, after eating it, I really wanted to throw up. But I saw young people around me eating with great appetite, looking really happy, especially right after the pandemic restrictions were just slightly lifted at that particular time. Particularly many people have been staying there. So I sometimes think maybe for us, these young people, if we could chew through suffering like this, that would also be a very interesting thing to do. Indeed, sometimes we, under normal circumstances, wouldn't dare to do it. May the Dharma protectors and three jewels bless us to let me endure suffering. Many people aren't like this. A lot of people, including some who are a bit older, are willing to accept additional foods in daily life, bitter, spicy or sour things, or those strange and unusual flavors. It's really hard for them. Even now, I still don't really have the courage to eat durian, not yet. Every time I want to try, I just can't. And that's how it is. When I went to Thailand, I didn't try it. It's still the same now. I've tried several times, but I just can't do it. I'm good at this. But for some reason, it seems durian and I just aren't meant to be. Whenever I encounter situations like this, I might even sometimes feel a bit nauseous. So sometimes when it comes to suffering, for some people, it's something terrifying. But for some people, suffering is truly seen as a particularly good opportunity for spiritual practice. When your mental strength is strong, you even keep praying. I pray that the Guru, the three jewels, will bless me and allow me to be blessed with bad karma. Within misfortune, there are all kinds of things, illnesses, various harms. If you lack mental strength, You may have started praying the guardian deity come, but when it comes, you can't accept. Then you pray to Dharma protectors, asking them to dispel these unfortunate misfortunes. This is certainly possible as well. It depends on your level of spiritual practice. I think you still need to have a certain level of awareness and realization in your personal practice. The Chöda practice is the same way. No matter when it is, you need joyful, confident conviction. If suffering comes, then no matter when it comes, no matter what kind of suffering it is, you can maintain a sense of joy, a confident sense of happiness. Having this kind of assurance is an advanced method of spiritual practice. Although right now, perhaps, not everyone has realized so much. We should understand when, if we use the right methods, it might be better for us. In the past, in our lives, many things encountering suffering were indeed extremely hard to accept and quite unpleasant for most people. But later on, because of this very thing, for your whole life, if you handle it well, it can turn out to be beneficial. On this point, everyone must be confident. Therefore, we truly need to embrace and adopt this method of accepting suffering. Even if you can't accept it joyfully, at least don't strongly reject it or spend every day just praying. Because he thinks hum hum bang bang for all illnesses and obstacles to be expelled. If you keep chanting hung hung papa like this, but if you follow true method and wish all sentient beings suffering upon yourself, and you are willing to bear it, then that is wonderful. Depends on your mind's strength. The strength of your mind is vital. If we keep training our minds and practice the exchange of self and others, then such a person should have no problem at all. On these principles, all of us should contemplate them deeply.
Bandara Bandara